Hi, I'm Sam Person, a senior in the PSU Graphic Design BFA program, and welcome to my thesis presentation titled Case Study Houses, a Field Guide. I'll start by going into how I arrived at this project and what goals I believe it accomplishes. Architecture is an omnipresent force in most people's lives, and I've long had an interest in it for many of the same reasons I'm interested in graphic design. It's a way to combine artistry and function in a way that exerts a foundational and often overlooked force on our lives. Specifically, modern architecture is the style that interests me the most. It's extremely different from almost any other common style of architecture, and during its heyday at the beginning of the 20th century, at least in the United States, modern architecture was awash with innovation and young architects itching to put their radical ideas into practice. The Case Study House program was born of artistic scarcity and physical surplus. During World War II, architects were predominantly involved with the war effort and constructing projects that related to it directly or indirectly. By the time the war ended, this restriction had created a buildup of excitement and unexplored intellectual terrain. Wartime left in its wake a number of manufacturing innovations and a surplus of materials and infrastructure, as well as an unprecedented demand for housing that would embody the American dream of well-kept suburbs accessible to the everyman. So, in the late 1940s, the Case Study House program was dreamt up by John Nintenza, the editor of Arts and Architecture magazine, to solve multiple problems at once. His plan was to leverage young, innovative architectural talent to produce replicable model homes that would give America's growing middle class stylish, modern, and highly efficient places to live. The existing body of scholarship on the case study houses is somewhat scattershot, with much information existing in wiki articles online or in the form of large, cumbersome monographs that, while attractive to look at and satisfying to pore over, could be intimidating to the new reader, and several of the best were published decades ago, so they're often expensive and/or difficult to find. This, combined with the program's inconsistent naming structure, can make learning about the program tedious, even though it produced some of the most visually beautiful and conceptually striking residential architecture of the century. This program ended almost 60 years ago. What can I add to that body of work? My goal was fairly simple: to take that unwieldy mass of information and turn it into a compact field guide that would give an interested reader everything they need to know about the program and nothing they don't. The information is all there, so it became a challenge of design to make it compact and palatable, and present it in a modern way that doesn't detract from the original aesthetic spirit of the magazine and the structures themselves. That brings me to the first crux of the book itself, the writing. This process added a whole dimension to the project that I really enjoyed, and it was very gratifying to be putting my own text on the page. This is where the bulk of my research was conducted during the prior term, as I needed to gather all the information that I wanted to pare down. Since there is a lot of detail one could go into about a program that produced 36 designs over almost 2 decades, my approach was to use short passages to highlight the most important or unique features of each house, and put the drier information like square footage and physical location into a consistent, easily skimmable sidebar. This allowed me to include highlights from the wealth of interesting information from the original magazine and other sources that put the designs in context with each other and how they exist today, and makes the project as a whole much more complete than just including images and sidebar information with some bulleted points about unique features or another similar approach. The other pillar of the project is, of course, what makes it a graphic design thesis, the design. There were several concrete steps I took in terms of overall visual direction to accomplish my goal of wrapping the original magazine's aesthetic in a modern package. First and foremost, I decided early on to use almost entirely black and white imagery published in the original magazine. These original images are not only still the best documentation there is of most of these houses, but many of them have since been demolished or remodeled beyond recognition. So it also helps keep everything consistent and gives the book a very sparse aesthetic that stays true to Arts and Architecture's mid-century minimalism. I limited the color palette to just one bright accent color, yellow, to give the design some extra flexibility and to provide maximum contrast against the dark, visibly vintage photography. In terms of typography, my approach was again to gently modernize it by keeping the high contrast, bold sans serifs, but without being excessively retro. It helps that the design of the magazine was so forward-thinking at the time, and so I think mine complements it appropriately. Arts and Architecture also made heavy use of typefaces like Future or Bold, as did many modernist graphic designs of the period, So I chose Cosmica for headers to maintain the heavier geometry of Futuro with a little more contemporary flair. I used Rama, a condensed sans serif, for my sidebar text for its mid-century touch as well as to preserve horizontal space, and finally Zytone Micro for body text as a very functional, attractive sans serif that's easy to read at small point sizes. The sidebar is both informational and functional, providing a consistent visual anchor for each spread. Since the book's content also comes with its own numbering system, it obviates the need for page numbers since each building's number is in the same spot at the top corner, and page numbers would only add complexity. Early on, I experimented with various aspect ratios for the size of the book, and eventually settled on making it square based on feedback from my professors and peers. This creates a natural flow on the page in combination with the sidebar, creating a slightly smaller area on the left page that introduces the eye to the spread before it flows to the more spacious right page. The square aspect ratio with the relatively small size also adds an element of approachability and tactility. I wanted to deliberately avoid making it feel too much like a larger coffee table book, since several prominent books on the program already use that form factor. I worked the layouts around the images and floor plans as much as possible. Dark images are often expanded to full bleed with text knocked out, and some of the floor plans incorporate yellow to tie the imagery into the book's visual language without altering the actual photographs. Some structures had a greater quantity or higher quality photos available depending on how they were archived, and so many of the more dramatic homes get an extra spread to show off the photography. The final piece of the book is a map of currently standing case study structures to give viewers an idea of the program's overall footprint, and to cap off the book with a more functional graphic element. The final product is a 102-page, 6-inch by 6-inch field guide that translates the large mass of information on the CSH program into an easily digestible, attractive package. In addition, I wanted to take the project one step beyond a publication to experiment with even more easily accessible ways to present this body of knowledge. To that end, I created a series of social posts designed for Instagram but which could easily be resized, that explore how the CSH designs could be publicized in the digital era, the way they were publicized in the magazine 60 years ago. They combine some of the more high-level information like the architects and sizes with the beautiful original photography in an interactive way, and the writing sections from the book translate neatly into the captions. That concludes the work I completed this term. Thank you for listening.